Hi, I'm Robert Rubin, and thanks for joining me again for our God for Grownups program. This is the second of two discussions we've had. The first should also be available to you if you're interested, and there will be 9 in all. Each one is a monthly discussion. This was a particularly interesting one. It was on politics, and I learned a lot that will really help me change and improve my book from this discussion. I really learned that it was headed in the wrong direction. So that was very useful to me, and I'm going to be completely rethinking the chapter, making it less I don't know, combative, if that's the right word, but and probably changing where in the book I discuss politics, though I still think politics is extremely important in terms of the things that are keeping people from embracing Christianity in this day and age, particularly those who are sort of from a different generation who weren't raised going to church and who may believe in God, but haven't really made the step to attending services. So please enjoy this session, and feel free to contact me with any questions you have. From here, after this week, things will be getting much less political, if that's something that you don't really want to deal with. It'll be much more about what the church does and some of the basic ideas of Christianity that we may be having a hard time communicating. So thanks so much for helping me with this book, and I'll see you next month if you feel like joining us. Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming. Now, I'd like to start off with by giving you sort of two things to compare, and then you can just chime in and say what you think you make of it. But in the section of the book that I had you read, I included a quote from the Bible, which is the story of the Pharisee who comes up to Jesus and says, what do we owe to Caesar? Right? Yeah. And Jesus tells him, he gives out the coin, he says, whose head's on the coin? They say, Caesar's. He says, well, give to Caesar what's Caesar's and give to God which is God, right? So that sounds like he's saying church and politics don't mix, right? But then, also in Matthew, we have this passage. This is during his Sermon on the Mount. Well, actually, it's not. Yeah, I guess it is. No, this is before the Sermon on the Mount. But he says, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's foes will be members of one's own household." And that's pretty interesting, because that's sort of where we are right now at this stage. So here we have one passage in the Bible that's saying, seems to be saying don't get involved with politics, and the other is saying, we're going to stir everything up. So how do you all find any kind of balance between those two sides to Christianity? Any thoughts?
I don't see him saying that they're separate.
Okay, great.
You can appear to be exclusive, but yet you're inclusive. And I think Jesus was being inclusive there. That you need to treat Caesar with the respect due him, at the same time with respect due to your fellow man, as God presents your fellow man. So I don't really see a separation there.
Good.
If you look at it from afar and examine it, They're not being exclusive.
But we also think of Jesus as being very peace-oriented, right? And love your neighbor. And here he's saying, I'm here to bring a sword.
Well, I think I've always thought of that as, well, we see it in so many ways. By being inclusive, it's going to make people upset. And, I mean, we love division. Just look around. And it's those people saying, yeah, we are going to bring everybody. Love your neighbor. I mean, that's one of the most radical things he's ever said. And when he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, the idea that it was the Samaritan, the outcast, loving people, was what was creating the division. So yeah, I agree. I don't think these two passages are opposite or tension. I think they're in some ways very different. Just talking about different parts of life. Will the following of Jesus' message create, family division? Sure, but then also will it create political division? Yeah. So yeah, I don't really see them as being in opposition to each other.
Jesus was real peaceful when he went into the temple and went after the money changers. I think the sword plays up pretty good.
Yeah.
So he wasn't real peaceful, was he?
No, and not in that situation. Well, one thing that I think is sort of interesting that I've learned is that if you read much history, you'll learn that in the early first century there was a lot written about the Son of God and the good news. And who do you think that was written about? It wasn't written about Christ. That hadn't been written yet. It was written about Caesar. Caesar was considered the Son of God by the Roman Empire. That was his divine title. And the Caesar was considered divine. And the victories of the Roman Empire over various countries and peoples and so forth, where they went out and slaughtered everybody, were trumpeted as the good news. So when Jesus is crucified and later on people start saying, Jesus is the Son of God, and the story of Jesus is the good news, this is a political answer to Rome, in a way. So you could say that the church, to some extent, started out political. But our question is, and that's sort of what I wanted to bring to you guys today, is has the way it's become political distorted Jesus' message? And in which ways has it distorted Jesus' message? And what should people who feel like they're hearing his message the right way do about politics? Do we if we're upset by the way the people at January 6th were using Jesus, do we do the same thing that they did? What do you all think? What do you think our response should be?
Well, I think that everybody, even those people on January 6th, all think that they're seeing it the right way.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Just as we do, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, I can't see them thinking that they're wrong and still doing that way. They have to believe that they're right. And I don't know what the answer is, because it's so difficult to get them to even consider your side. I mean, I understand their side because I grew up there. It doesn't mean I agree with it, but I understand their thinking. My family, my great-grandfather's home was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And so,
Mine too.
so my family all grew up as Lincoln Republicans. My mother still thinks that Republican Party is the party of Lincoln. And she sees no difference between the Republican Party's stance and what she's taught in church. And she thinks she thinks that it all makes sense, and that people like us here in the Episcopal Church, we're all going to go to hell because we're wrong. and you can't even avoid, try to avoid conversations with him. I talked to a cousin last night, and I called to tell her happy birthday. And all she wanted to talk about was how horrible Joe Biden is and how great Donald Trump was. And that's not what I called to talk about anyway. I had no desire to talk about politics with her, but that's all she wanted to talk about.
Robert, when I was reading what you had written out for us, the politics was just not between the Jews in first century Palestine and the Roman Empire. If you look at what was going on within Judaism itself, you had the Pharisees, very, very rigid, so you could say, I think they're conservative. And then you had the Sadducees, a little bit more moderate in their beliefs. And then you had the Zealots. So is there any difference 2,000 years later with what we are experiencing? So Jesus not only had to respond to Rome invading their territory, but also the politics within the Jewish religion itself.
Yeah.
So when you ask the question, well, who would Jesus vote for, whatever, he would certainly represent his Father's platform. He was there to do his Father's will, and not the will of any political party, neither Rome, nor the Pharisees, or the Zealots, or the Sadducees. His will was to focus on that of the Father. So that's just what kept going on in my mind as we're navigating these political and religious tumult that's going on around us. Where is the Father calling us?
Right, and I think a lot of us feel that call, and we're just not sure what to do with it.
That's correct.
Right?
That's
Kate,
what
you
we
want to
do.
say something?
Yeah, and also I feel, for me, what I see as a real difference between maybe Jesus's period and what is happening right now with us is this Christian nationalism is trying very hard to erase any separation between church and state. They have embraced the state to the point that they now want to say, if you're not believing what the right says, all these things they are, embracing, then you're not a Christian. And that has really separated church and state. And I think that's part of why we're in a really dangerous place right now.
Yeah, and one of the things that's kind of interesting is that, as I mentioned, Christianity starts out as this movement, for independence in Palestine, but also in opposition to the Roman Empire. And what happens 300 years later? The Roman Empire adopts Christianity, and now the same people that crucified Jesus are spreading the word, right? But they're also spreading the empire, right? And so from then really until the 20th century, a lot of nationalism, have associated themselves with the Christian message. And do you see a conflict between those two things in history?
This is getting into an issue that I spoke before. No disrespect to Father Bob. Love the guy. I really did. He's great. But one of the failings is we don't teach people to respect one another. I may not like you, but I like what you're doing. I like the direction you're going. So I have respect for you. Maybe the way you do things is why I don't like you. That's okay. You got your way, I got my way. I'm an ex-engineer, and we used to solve problems by a bunch of us getting together in a room. Some of us liked each other's. Some would kill the other guy on the street. But we would focus on the task. And we all went in there with the same objective. And that was to produce the best product we could and forgetting the I game. So when somebody spoke, even if it was someone we didn't like, we respected their opinion. And that's what's missing today.
And one of the difficulties that we've faced is that this sort of respect the other person's opinion. And to some extent what Father Bob talked about, he said, I'm not going to tell you what to do about your politics. What does the church do when it sees something that is unjust? I mentioned in the passage that famous letter from Dr. King from Birmingham jail, where he is writing it to the clergymen in Birmingham who've said, you're moving too fast, you're doing things in too much of a hurry, give it time, we'll work it out. And he's saying, all we've done is wait, right? And he's saying, I'm disappointed by you calling me a radical just because I'm getting out there and trying to actually, sell what Jesus was telling us to do.
Yeah.
The issue then becomes a lot of churches, when this kind of stuff goes from outside the walls to inside the walls, a lot of disharmony breaks out within congregations because people have different points of view on this stuff. And so the church doesn't want to lose all its people and, fail as an enterprise, so they try to sort of quiet it down and find things that people can agree on and that sort of thing. So what do you think the tension between sort of keeping a congregation together and doing what you believe the Bible is telling you to do, where should churches come down on things like that?
Robert?
Yes.
To me, and I want to make sure nobody misunderstood, there is a very big difference between saying, this is what the gospel says to me, and saying, you need to go do this.
Yes.
One of my seminary professors said over and over, you don't really need to be in the front line of the demonstration parade. You need to educate your people to the point where they may want to go be in the front line of that demonstration. And at the same time, no matter what we believe, and indeed whether we like each other or not, but especially when we believe different things, I think we have to hear it with respect for two reasons, and I'll be quick with this. One reason is that we might be wrong in what we believe, so at least we need to consider that the other. And the second is that at the end of the day, or maybe long before the end of the day, no matter what we believe and they believe, we need to be able to walk up the aisle of the church hand in hand.
But that's where respect comes in.
Yes.
Because,
yes,
you or Father Bob might say something I disagree with, but I just said I have a great deal of respect for him. I have a great deal of respect for you. And if I have respect and you say something I disagree with, to execute that respect, I got to go back and think about what you said. And at some point in time, hey, Bob, let's go have a beer and discuss this. And we may walk away still disagreeing, but that doesn't make any difference. We still have respect for the other person. And it's made us think.
Jackie?
My husband and I, we attend Compass Christian Church, formerly the Point Church of Fuquay. About 4 Sundays ago, our pastor said something that was very profound to me, because he speaks on all things, but he puts it in he doesn't sugarcoat anything, let's put it that way. But he says acceptance is not approval. Jesus accepted everyone, even though he didn't approve of what they were doing, how they were doing it, what they were saying, how they were saying it. So he was saying, just because someone is of a different faith, race, gender, political view. Acceptance is not approval. Acceptance opens the door for you to listen, for you to be tolerant of other people's opinions and views, even though they're not yours.
I think that's a great observation.
Yes.
Robert,
Yeah.
you're talking about why kids don't come to church. And I think the generations after us don't have the same idea of respect that we do. I think that they think that you have to earn their respect, not just because we're their elder, but you've got to show me something that I will respect. And I think that when I say love-hate relationship with the institution, you know, I think these kids, when they walk into a church and everybody looks the same, smells the same, makes the same amount of money, you know, all that, or even if they all don't look alike, but nothing important is paid attention to. There might be the trappings of worship and this sort of, excuse me, Father Bob, I don't really mean trappings, but yet they don't see social justice issues being paid attention to in a real tangible way. That, you know, yeah, I'll whip out my checkbook and I'll write a check and I'll put it in the plate, but don't ask me to attend a town hall meeting on a Monday night.
Or don't ask me to contribute.
Right.
Because they think that the government is already doing too much for disadvantaged people. Big time.
Well, and I'm just saying, I'm not even, not even what they're thinking about what the government does or doesn't do. I'm just thinking
The witness isn't
the
there.
witness isn't there with church people. So when we're talking about kids not coming to church, they're wanting to, so I've heard, want to sink their teeth into something more meaningful and tangible and what's the word I want? Intentional, real, and not just a bunch of lip service on the pew every Sunday.
Right.
That's why the Proud Boys are important.
Say more about that. What do you mean?
Well, the Proud Boys have stood up for something.
Okay.
Proud Boys.
There are these.
January
I don't know if you
6th.
saw the printout, but it's that picture of the guy with the gun and the sort of muscular guy who's out there protesting in Raleigh. Who there were some of the people that Trump sort of said invade the Capitol to, and who did it?
No.
Okay.
What's your question, Kitty? What did you say?
I said, who are they? I've never heard of
You know about Charlottesville, the protest in Charlottesville,
where the young woman was killed.
the car.
Well,
mowed
Proud
down
Boys
by
were
people.
part of the January 6th thing, too.
Yeah, they
Pretty
were.
much.
They're intolerant, far-right Christian nationalists that get violent.
They believe they should, too.
Well, they're anarchists.
Will, you want to say something?
Yeah, this generation is different on many different levels and stuff. They're, if you just look at what is going on in social media, there's a lot of disrespect. If you can do it on a level of social media where you don't see the person or don't know who they are, they go by a hashtag or something like that, you can see a lot of disrespectful stuff. A lot of things being said, a lot of things being done, besides, Proud Boys that you have, Oath Keepers, things of that nature. So it's a lot of stuff being done. So it's just a very different generation that is being grown up. Like everyone in this room here, we've grown up a different way, than what this generation is, where you now have widespread technology and they're growing up a lot faster. I recently had a niece, and the first thing that was put in her hand was a tablet. You know, where they are instantly on the internet right now. So they're learning at a geometric rate of everything that they can get their hands on and look at. So this generation they can grow up in hate so quickly now.
Right. Well, let me throw one curveball in here. I read a very interesting statistic, which is that there are 20,000 different Christian denominations in the world now, right? And so what's happened typically is that groups of people who think alike and feel alike have gathered together into their own little congregations, their own particular faiths, and so we have this sort of breaking up rather than coming together of the Christian church. And I wonder if a lot of these young people who see this as, you know, different, all these different enclaves of people who are just with people like themselves. And the question is, how do we get beyond that, and what, as individual Christians, we can do to try to sort of open things up and really dialogue with people who are in different groups than we are.
And another thing that's happening at the same time is that because of the media and particular segments, like the Christian nationalists or the rabid evangelicals, is that generally speaking, if you say the word Christian, people believe that we are all the same. We are all that same radically judgmental, rigid, demanding the same belief, and we're not. I mean, that's one of the things that when people say Christians do this, you know, they mean that, and they don't mean the kind of Christians that are exhibiting love, helping people, and recognizing and respecting different beliefs.
Yeah,
Turn up the sound.
I can't, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was just going to toss another curveball in. You know, it's easy to look at these kids these days. Of course, in my head, I'm always asking, well, who's raising those kids?
Right.
Somebody taught them to be this way, and somebody's not teaching them to be, you know, other.
Yes.
And so, I mean, this comes back, you know, how do we respond? I mean, I think one of the ways in terms of respect, and I totally agree that, you know, the lack of respect, both online and even in person, it's like, what are we doing to respect them? And, you know, if a person comes in and is not feeling respected, then I have to ask the question, what am I doing that's not communicating respect? And you know, and that's one of those, you know, it's hard to, sometimes I don't know. I mean, I think I'm being respectful, but if it's not coming across, then, you know, that's on me.
So what would you have done if you had called your cousin to wish her happy birthday, and she wants to get into this, almost a monologue probably, about her feelings, about her, this is what I go through with my older son.
Sure, and with my dad too. And, you know, it's funny, I was looking, you know, Robert gave us that passage where, you know, Jesus is dealing with the question about the taxes. And I think we can learn a lot from Jesus' response. Because, you know, the first thing it says after the question, Jesus, aware of their malice, like, he knows, he understands what's going on. And then his response is interesting because he doesn't answer the question. He responds with a question. And, you know, it's a guiding question. And I think, if, you know, other places in the Gospels you see him do this where he doesn't answer questions. Because, as we said, we know that we're not going to change their mind immediately. We know that we're not, we know that they're not really listening. So you ask a question.
To address what you said, our younger people, we are the examples to them.
Right.
well,
And that's
they're
a
doing very
shame when
good
you
job.
stop and think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, they learned this behavior from somewhere.
Well, it's a lot of it's peer group pressure too. I mean,
Right.
I know it's the parents, but you know, you.
But they're
can't
not
have-
seeing that. They're not seeing a different way.
Right, they don't. And all I wanted to say about that is, we talked about the children, and it seems like the children who were brought up in the church don't want to come, and the children who weren't brought up in the church think Christianity is a swear word.
Right. Well, one of the issues that I'm trying to tackle in the book, and this is sort of gets to the question I wanted to ask you about whether this is the topic I should open the book with or not, is that a lot of the people in this generation, the younger generation, and people who are dropping out of the church are saying, well, they just want me to believe in a fairy tale. And they're not being true to the, you know, what they say about it. So why should I listen when they're just, getting off in their little groups and being angry at each other about, and they're asking me to believe something. You know, I believe in evolution. I believe in the Big Bang. I'm not sure whether Jesus' miracles really were miracles, that kind of stuff. And so how can I be, if in Sunday school they're throwing all that at me, like I've got to just be brainwashed, right? So that's one of the things I wanted to sort of address in this book is how do we be true to what the church and the Bible has taught us about the meaning of all that, and still be honest with people who grow up in this century and who are part of this generation, and tell them how that's important. Yes.
Okay, Robert, so you've added a whole bunch of questions after the initial question, which I think really is going to serve you the most, and that is, should I start my book with this? So my question back to you is, what audience do you want to read this book?
Exactly.
Because if you don't want other people reading this, except people who think like we do, this is not the right beginning. Because the whole time I read this, I relate to this, but I thought I won't even get certain people to finish this chapter because it's already in their mind our propaganda.
Well, I think that part of the reason for that is because there are two things that you've presented. One is a general picture of the current environment using January 6th as the model or the symbol of it. And then you kind of offer an alternative. My suggestion would be eliminate the alternative and don't use specific names like Trump. Refer to the movement that he represents so that you remove the political, the immediately political, and you're looking at it from a slight distance. And you're seeing cultural trends that are represented in this way, and they're causing chaos and division, but they're falsely using this name, Christian nationalism, whatever they're using, as a screen or whatever you want to call it, but you're not offering an alternative. And so it raises a question of where will you go with this?
Right.
And that might draw someone in, because I think the way I read the give to Caesar what is Caesar's is, like Father Bob said, he doesn't tell you what to believe, he offers a choice. And I believe that a faith, a real religious faith, presents guiding questions, not answers.
Good. Yes.
I want to go back a little bit to what the young lady was asking. So how do you talk to her cousin? I'm going to give your cousin a different name, okay? So you just, Sylvia, I just called you to tell you happy birthday. I didn't call you to get it straight. Because I think when I read the Bible with my husband, Jesus was a gangster. You know, Jesus called a spade a spade. Yes, he loves you. Yes, he wants you to change. And that's how I presented him to my sons. Jesus is a gangster, and he's also a gentleman. He's not going to force himself upon you.
Right.
He's going to ask.
And one doesn't
And all you
exclude
have to
the
do-
other. You
right.
could be
And all
both.
you have to do is say yes. And so what I did is I made a mandate that we're going to all go to church together. Now, I have a 20-year-old. I got but sitting beside me in church when the pastor is saying some things, I saw him, he was looking down, and then he looked up at the pulpit, and I'm like, yeah, because that's you. And he was just talking, and I'm like, I see my son and he was like, I heard him literally say, because 2 Sundays before that, our pastor said, it is up to Jesus to change people.
Oh.
When you invite someone to church, you're not inviting them to change them. You're inviting them to meet Jesus. Absolutely. He does the changes. You get them in here, and from that point on, I've seen a difference in my son.
Wow.
Right.
And he'll ask me questions. As far as how do we reach young people, I think we have a problem, and I don't know if this is a religious thing or an adult thing. We have a problem with saying we don't know.
Right.
There you go.
I don't know. I drove a school bus for a while, and little kids would be like, Miss Jackie, and they would ask me questions, and I'm like, that's a very good question. Miss Jackie don't know. And they would be like, you don't know? But you're a grown-up. And I say, you got a little secret. Grown-ups don't know everything. We have to learn things just like you all. And they were like,
So maybe we should be talking about church as a place to come with questions rather than to get answers.
absolutely.
But you get a lot of pushback when you're questioning things that people feel in their hearts, right? Jean?
Yeah, I personally don't know whether, going back to one question in your chapter was, should the church get involved in politics? But personally, I feel if you're a caring Christian, you don't sit back and see unfair, unjust laws being put into place and voted on and carried out. And I think we're at the point now, being a female, I think it's taken us many years to feel like that we are equal. I still hear women saying they have the same job as a male, and they're not getting paid as much. And so, and not just because I'm a woman, I don't think any law that doesn't take in the goodwill of everybody should ever be enacted.
I think your problem is complex. And complex really ought to be taken out of the dictionary, because complex usually means there's a bunch of little problems, and let's go focus on the ones we can solve now, and eventually we will solve this complexity. So my thinking is, no matter how you start your book out, you're going to alienate some other faction. So if you can figure out some way that you can start it out and hit all of them at the same time, like put an index in there. If you're this, then go to page 421. If you're this, start at page 85. Unless you can come up with something like that, I don't think you're going to reach the...
Well, that's one of my issues too, because I don't really think I'm going to be able to, with my point of view, go out there and convert somebody who's marching on Washington. But I'm trying to get people who are upset by people who are marching on Washington to get involved. And I guess that's my sort of, I'm giving up part of my audience in a sense.
What's the name of the book?
Robert,
Right now my working title is Living Christianity.
Well, that's got to change.
Yeah. That ain't gonna work.
Keep on going to pick that up. Oh,
Okay.
Bob wants to say
Bob
something.
wants to say something.
Robert, I'm looking at the outline in your propaganda.
What did he say?
The outline in my propaganda.
He's joking.
It seems to me that chapters like Who Would Jesus Vote For, maybe even Prove God to Me, What is the Truth, need to come after the burning issues, the Bible tells me so, what do we believe, and those kind of things seem to me something that people should consider before they consider these not nebulous, but these questions. I mean, where is it? The Bible tells me so gives. I haven't read it, but knowing you, I suspect it is a way of looking at the Bible that helps us ask the right questions. So that when we get to who would Jesus vote for, we can ask the right questions.
Yeah, well, my next chapter, the one that is chapter 2, is basic, and the one we'll read for next month is, I take 7 issues that people have trouble with. Like, how could an omniscient God who knows everything and is all-powerful allow people to suffer? And how does, what about miracles? Do they really happen?
But I think Bob's...
And those kinds of questions.
Yeah, but I think Bob's point is, where do we get the idea that God is omniscient?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where did that come from, this idea? And, we kind of have to say, well, at least most Christians would say that we get that idea from the Bible. It's like, okay, show me.
Mm-hmm.
And, having that Bible thing maybe earlier helps us answer those, or ask the right questions about those.
Good, I'll take that, I'll think
that
about
might
that.
be what he's getting at, I think.
How about this for a title? Christianity with a big question mark, and underneath it, I'm looking for it too. That's T-O-O.
Well, we've got to wrap up because we went longer on our introductions than I'd meant to. But just briefly, in the part that you read, what were the parts that jumped out at you as the best parts, and which parts did you think were the weakest parts? I gather that my sort of negativity towards the Christian nationalists and that sort of thing is a weak part. That I'm being too judgmental.
No, well, it's just you definitely taking a position. But I would think the bigger question beyond that, which the focus is all about that, is to dig deeper into what has created this discontent. What is feeding this discontent? And where does religion or faith or Christianity have a door to address that? Because there's something lacking in their lives, and maybe that's the place that. But just to finish what I'm thinking also is, we don't need to look any further than ourselves. What example are we? It's one thing to know the Bible inside and out and have read it 50 times. But can you practice? Do you actually sometimes stop and try to practice a life that would make a different choice? That's not your choice, not human nature, but something that's from the teachings.
In a real broad sense, are you hoping the end result will be understanding or action?
I'm hoping that people will stop feeling apologetic about believing in the Christian message, and will feel like I can respect myself, and people can respect me, even if I say I believe, the message of the Bible, and that includes, not necessarily believing it literally, but believing that there is truth to the essence of the Christian message. So that they'll come out of this saying, the message has been distorted, mistakes have been made, people have misinterpreted it, but the message is good. Right? And we still should be, we'll be a better people individually and as a group if we listen to it. And the alternative is believing in nothing. Which is what a lot of our society tends to ask us to do these days. Believe in what you can buy and what you can have.
But what you're also, when you say what we believe is Christianity, it's just like, I was just looking at one paragraph, Jesus' message of social justice thus conflicts with the church's institutional need for money and steady or growing membership. So there's that. But then what you were also just saying, if someone doesn't believe that the Christian message points us towards social justice issues and going headstrong and being very involved in that, if they don't believe that, which a lot of Christian people don't want any part of that. Don't make me sit next to somebody that doesn't look like me, but I am a Christian.
Right. Absolutely.
Well,
So,
that's sort of,
how
I
do
think
you-
that would be a good place to sort of wrap up, because in this passage about the coin, one of the interpretations that I read by several theologians is what he's saying is the basic Christian message is Jesus is Lord, right? Jesus is God, and not he's essentially king, right? He's saying he's here to be to bring the kingdom of God, and Caesar is not God. Caesar is not Lord. Jesus is. God is Lord. And so when Jesus is saying, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's, he's actually being kind of tricky there. He's going to satisfy that Pharisee who was out to stir up trouble, but he's not admitting actually that Caesar is top dog here. And and so he's basically saying what the Scripture teaches, what I teach, is what you should order your life by, and not what the state, however loyal you may be to your politician or your nation or your favorite views. You need to balance those against these higher issues, and that's one of the things that I think that passage is saying.
Yeah. I think what I hear Kathy saying, and some other folks too, is, when asked directly what your goal is, you're able to give a very succinct, clear statement of what that goal is, and it's getting lost in this chapter. There's a lot of, we're spending all this time talking about specific political questions. That's not what your goal is for the beginning of the book.
Right.
And
I think page 18 is very good.
Yeah.
It's an approach. Start off that.
Yeah, but stating that, hey, there's this problem, there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
Even raising that, but why are so many people not coming into church? That sort of thing. Some of the political things might be good examples as to things, but you're trying to answer those questions and get at it right, and quite frankly, it's not a long enough chapter to do that. In only 20 pages, you're not going to answer all these questions.
Robert, how many pages do you anticipate your book being?
It's going to be a big fat book.
It is. You told me 500 pages. So
of
you've
people
got to
will pick
ask
it up.
yourself, who's even going to be picking that up?
Yeah.
What is your audience? Who are you writing for? And I think once that is clear in your mind, who's going to pick up a 500-page volume, where you put this particular chapter may just fall right into place.
Okay. Well, this has
can't
been
see
very,
your
very
average
helpful.
day kid.
Very
or
helpful to me
20,
to
30-year-old
hear
picking
this,
that
to
up.
hear your concerns, and I hope you'll feel free to email me if you have things that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to say, or and after we finish talking, after we end here, I'm going to be hanging around, so we can certainly talk some more. But I feel like I want to cut it off at this point and not just keep going and going. But thank you all so much for coming today.